The sheet, trembling in Eleanor Briggs' hands, carried rows of letters that looked like nonsense to anyone who hadn't been trained at Bletchley Park, but she had just uncovered the pattern hiding within. October 14, 1940, and the 24-year-old mathematician had cracked a German army cipher. She could read the orders, see the troop movements, understand the strategy before anyone else in Britain. Eleanor hurried down the long corridor of the converted country house, past rooms where dozens of young women bent over notebooks full of frequency tables and permutation charts, past the locked doors where the whirring machines scanned through endless rotor combinations. She pushed open the door to her supervisor's office without hesitation. "I've got it," she whispered urgently. The veteran codebreaker looked up, stunned. The paper passed across the desk, and the silence hung heavy. This was the defining moment repeated countless times across those secretive halls, when strings of meaningless letters transformed into commands, orders, and warnings, when the impossible became routine, and the young codebreakers glimpsed the enemy's intentions before they acted. And yet, each new message still carried the weight of danger, the knowledge of lives hanging in the balance. The story began years earlier, when the government purchased a stately manor in Buckinghamshire for the Code and Cipher School, a place that would become the beating heart of Britain's silent war. By September 1939, hundreds of recruits had gathered, tasked with an impossible mission: decipher Enigma, read the enemy, do it before the nation fell. The Enigma machine sat innocuously on a wooden table, its typewriter-like keys masking the storm it contained. Press a key, and an electrical current threaded through a labyrinth of wires, bouncing across a plug board, before passing through 3 rotors, each capable of assuming 26 starting positions. The rotors rotated with each keystroke, scrambling the letters anew, a ceaseless ballet of substitution and permutation. To anyone else, it was gibberish. To a codebreaker, it was a puzzle of staggering complexity. The Germans believed their communications unbreakable. They were wrong just barely. Polish cryptanalysts had glimpsed the solution in 1932, secretly unraveling early Enigma variants over 7 long years. When war loomed in July 1939, they handed over their knowledge, their replicas, their insights to British and French intelligence. This clandestine gift would alter the course of history, giving Bletchley Park the chance to do the impossible. But the Germans were relentless. Each new rotor, each complex plugboard setting, meant starting from scratch. The naval Enigma introduced a 4th rotor, tightening the web. In September 1939, Alan Turing arrived at Bletchley Park. At 27, already a mathematician of unusual brilliance, he regarded Enigma not as an insurmountable wall, but as a rule-bound machine, a puzzle governed by logic. The machine's strength was its variability, but rules underpinned that variability, and rules could be exploited. Turing envisioned the bomb, an electromechanical computer capable of testing thousands of rotor settings in seconds. If a configuration produced impossible letter combinations, it was discarded, and the next was tested, and the next, until eventually, the machine hummed in rhythm with human ingenuity. Victory, the first bomb, began operations in March 1940. 6 feet tall, 7 feet long, weighing nearly a ton. It sounded like 1,000 knitting needles clattering in unison. Slow at first, it accelerated as more bombs came online and analysts refined the process. By January 1940, the first meaningful decrypts arrived: a mundane weather report, but proof that the system could be defeated. Months followed with more supply requisitions, casualty reports, troop movements. Each decrypt, fragile on thin paper designed to vanish at a touch, was called a flimsy. Gordon Weltman, a Cambridge mathematician, observed patterns invisible to others. Units reported to headquarters. Headquarters relayed orders back. Call signs repeated. Relationships mapped. Traffic analysis was born. Sometimes the metadata, the who, when, and how often, was more valuable than the content itself. By May 1940, as Germany surged into France, Bletchley was intercepting Luftwaffe traffic. Not every message, not quickly, but enough to anticipate operations and save lives. The messages were direct, brutally so. Luftwaffe pilots listed targets, fuel, bomb loads. Army units described positions, casualties, and supplies. The Germans, confident in Enigma, wrote plainly. Hugh Alexander, a chess champion turned analyst, likened reading these decrypts to playing a game with visible enemy pieces, while hiding his own. The power was intoxicating, but the moral weight unbearable. Joan Clark, a female cryptanalyst, recalled reading a report detailing casualties from a London raid the night before. She had heard the distant thunder, the bomb's echoes. Now she read the precise German account, clinical in its detachment. It was very strange, she said. Reading the enemy's mail while they were trying to kill you. Breakthroughs arrived gradually. Captured codebooks, refined bombs, and better cribs opened new windows. By mid-1940, Luftwaffe communications were decrypted reliably. Fighter Command, armed with ultra-intelligence, positioned squadrons to counter raids, sometimes with hours' notice. Then came November 14, 1940. A massive Luftwaffe raid targeted Coventry. Over 500 bombers carried 600 tons of explosives. Churchill faced a devastating choice: warn the city, risking exposure of Enigma's compromise, or stay silent. History records the devastation. 568 dead, a medieval cathedral reduced to rubble. Yet Bletchley read every after-action report, knowing they could have changed the outcome, and could not act. Peter Hilton later reflected on reading reports of atrocities. We knew things that would make your hair stand on end, and we couldn't tell anyone. We couldn't even tell each other. The war changed when Germany invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. Operational orders flew via Enigma, revealing more than strategy reports from Einsatzgruppen. Precise, bureaucratic, horrifying. The Codebreakers were reading genocide in real time. The knowledge propelled them forward. Their response a grim determination to shorten the war. Naval Enigma remained a thorn. The Atlantic Wolf Pack strangled Britain. Merchant ships disappearing faster than replacements arrived. Without breaking Naval Enigma, Bletchley could only watch. May 9, 1941. Changed that. The Royal Navy captured U-110 before its crew destroyed the Enigma machine and codebooks. The breakthrough was operational, not mathematical. Within weeks, convoy routes shifted. Sinkings dropped. Britain survived. By February 1942, the Germans introduced a new Naval Enigma variant. Its added complexity blinded Bletchley. For 10 long months, the Atlantic became a graveyard. Merchant ship losses skyrocketed. Over 600,000 tons sunk in November alone. Analysts worked frantically, refining techniques, expanding bomb operations, cross-referencing traffic, until finally, in December 1942, the breakthrough came. Why boat movements could be tracked, wolf packs avoided, and the tide of the Atlantic slowly shifted. The Codebreakers were learning to read the war's nervous system. Every dispatch, every operational order, every situation report flowing through Enigma. Break enough messages quickly enough, and the war machine became visible, predictable. By 1943, Bletchley Park employed 9,000 people. The majority were young women, plucked from universities and trained under strict secrecy. Some operated the bombs, others performed traffic analysis, translated decrypts, or filed and indexed intelligence. The operation was industrial in scale. Bombs ran day and night in the long, narrow huts behind the mansion. Each machine tested rotor positions ceaselessly until a possible setting was found. Operators would verify manually. Most were wrong, but when the drums finally stopped, the letter combinations resolved into German, and the rush of achievement was electric. Sarah Baring, a bomb operator, recalled the thrill. You'd be standing there, watching the drum spin, and suddenly it would stop. You'd test it, and sometimes it worked. You'd broken the code, you'd done something that mattered. Yet, the highest level intelligence came from a source beyond Enigma. In 1940, British intelligence discovered that Hitler had developed a new cipher system for his personal communications, the Lorenz cipher, dubbed Geheimschreiber, 12 rotors, unfathomably complex. Breaking it seemed impossible. John Tiltman, one of Bletchley's most talented cryptanalysts, discovered a crack. In August 1941, a German operator's error sent a message twice with minor differences. Tiltman compared the two, extracted the key pattern, and began decoding. It took months, but his breakthrough allowed Bletchley to understand Lorentz logic. Each message still required fresh settings, and speed was crucial. Enter Tommy Flowers, a post office engineer with a radical idea. Mechanical bombs weren't fast enough. He proposed an electronic machine, using vacuum tubes, operating at lightning speeds. Colleagues laughed. Too many tubes, too many failures, impossible. Yet Flowers persevered. By February 1944, Colossus, the world's first large-scale electronic computer, began operating. A room-sized machine with 1,500 vacuum tubes, capable of processing 5,000 characters per second. Colossus could break Lorenz messages in hours instead of weeks. The intelligence was extraordinary. Hitler's direct orders to field marshals, deployment plans, assessments of Allied operations, even his directives to hold Stalingrad. Bletchley was reading the Führer's personal communications. The impact was immense. Decrypts revealed German troop placements, strategy assessments, and expectations of Allied invasions. 1 March 1944 message showed Hitler's belief that the Allies would land at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy, crucial information for the success of D-Day. Yet the human cost weighed heavily. Every decrypt meant lives, British and American soldiers. Lives depended on what they read, civilian casualties, atrocities, logistical errors, all visible in bureaucratic German dispatches. Codebreakers understood the stakes but acted only to shorten the war, never to intervene directly. Security around ultra-intelligence was absolute. Decrypts were printed on water-soluble paper, dissolved if touched by flame, delivered in locked boxes. They were destroyed after reading. Only top commanders knew the source. Operations could not rely solely on ultra. Reconnaissance confirmed intelligence before action. The Germans trusted Enigma fully, unaware the Allies anticipated every move. Churchill received daily boxes of the most important decrypts, his golden eggs, guiding strategy for convoys, offensives, and resource allocation. Ultra allowed Britain and its allies not just to fight the war, but to read the enemy's playbook while playing. Meanwhile, Mavis Lever, who had broken the Italian naval cipher before Matapan, never knew the full extent of her impact until after the war. Her decrypt had enabled the Royal Navy to sink 3 Italian cruisers, killing 2,000 Italian sailors while losing only 3 British. Yet at the time, she only knew she had done something important. Most Bletchley veterans kept silent. For decades, bound by the Official Secrets Act, ordinary lives resumed, teaching, research, family. But behind every mundane routine lay the weight of knowledge, the memories of reading atrocities, of seeing evil in bureaucratic form and responding only by working faster. Bletchley Park had transformed from a country mansion into the crucible of a modern intelligence revolution. Thousands of minds, young and largely unknown, deciphered the language of war. Their industrial-scale cryptanalysis, the relentless operation of bombs and Colossus, and the disciplined interpretation of decrypts created the most successful intelligence operation in history. Each message broken, each machine operated, each line read in secrecy, carried both strategic advantage and moral burden. They were witnessing history, yet invisible to it. The war's outcome was molded by their hands, yet their sacrifices were unseen. They read the codes that would kill, that would save, that would determine the fate of nations, and carried their knowledge silently, bearing the unacknowledged weight of victory. Turing, Flowers, Tiltman, Lever, Clark, Baring, Hilton, names etched in history only later had done the extraordinary, balancing intellect, secrecy, and conscience in a world at war. By 1944, the rhythm at Bletchley Park had become relentless. Colossus hummed continuously, the bombs clicked without pause, and the young women who operated them moved with quiet precision, almost as if part of the machines themselves. The war was entering its final stages, but the stakes remained impossibly high. Every message decoded could save lives or hasten death. Every decrypt revealed not just enemy strategy, but the human cost of each order. Analysts read reports of troop movements, supply shortages, and battle outcomes, sometimes learning of strikes before Allied forces themselves engaged the enemy. Each day, each hour, the weight of knowledge grew heavier. D-Day approached, June 6, 1940. For the Normandy landings, the Allies had executed an elaborate deception, Operation Fortitude, convincing Hitler that the invasion would occur at Pas-de-Calais. Bletchley had a front row seat, reading Lorenz decrypts detailing German beliefs, command movements, and reinforcements. The information confirmed the deception worked. Hitler's attention remained fixated elsewhere, allowing the Allies to gain critical hours, a beachhead, and the momentum needed to liberate Western Europe. Yet, the Codebreakers understood that for every life saved, there were still countless others in the balance. The ethical calculus was impossible, but the mission demanded clarity, discipline, and silence. As Allied forces pushed inland, Bletchley continued to intercept German communications across the continent. Signals from the Eastern Front revealed the systematic destruction carried out by the Einsatzgruppen in occupied Soviet territories. The Codebreakers read reports of massacres with bureaucratic detachment, chronicling numbers and locations of civilians executed. Joan Clark recalled one decrypt that detailed a bombing raid on London, sent the night before she had heard the distant thunder from her office. It was strange, she said later. We were reading the enemy's reports while living through our own war. You could never unsee that. Each decrypt carried that duality, strategic advantage and human horror intertwined. By late 1944, Bletchley had not only broken Enigma and Lorenz, but had become the backbone of Allied intelligence operations. The Atlantic wolf packs were finally in retreat. Merchant convoys crossed with far fewer losses. The Luftwaffe's raids on Britain had ceased to terrorize us predictably. Ultra-intelligence had saved thousands of lives and reshaped operational planning across every theater of war. Yet, outside the park's red brick walls, the world remained largely unaware. For those working inside, success was measured not in headlines, medals, or acclaim, but in decrypted messages, numbers on a page, and the unending cycle of machines and minds. When the war ended in May 1945, the staff of Bletchley faced an extraordinary burden. The machines were dismantled. Colossus computers were broken up, their blueprints burned. Ultra-intelligence documents were shredded or dissolved. The site itself, once the epicenter of secrecy and strategy, nearly became a housing development, and the people, thousands of young men and women, mathematicians, linguists, engineers, and clerks, returned to ordinary lives. Teachers, researchers, office workers, parents, yet the knowledge they carried remained immense, hidden, and profoundly personal. They had read Hitler's directives, the operational details of the Wehrmacht, the bureaucratic accounts of mass murder, and the calculated logistics of genocide. They understood the war in ways few could imagine, and for decades, could tell. No one, Mavis Lever, never knew the full scale of her impact until decades later. Her work on the Italian naval cipher had altered the course of battles. Alan Turing, posthumously celebrated, had laid the foundations of modern computing, yet lived a life cut short by prejudice and persecution. Tommy Flowers, John Tiltman, Gordon Welchman, Joan Clark, Peter Hilton, Sarah Baring, names largely unknown for decades, had carried the weight of victory and moral responsibility silently, bound by secrecy. The human story of Bletchley was extraordinary not because of machines or mathematics alone, but because of the young, brilliant, and mostly anonymous people who bore the burden of knowing. In the 1970s, the curtain finally lifted. The work of Bletchley Park entered public consciousness. The ingenuity, courage, and sacrifice of its people reshaped how the world understood intelligence, war, and secrecy. Historians now credit Ultra with shortening the war by 2 to 4 years, saving millions of lives and making operations like D-Day possible. Modern computing owes its lineage to Colossus. Intelligence agencies around the world learned from Bletchley's combination of mathematical theory and industrial-scale cryptanalysis. But more importantly, the moral and human story endured, of those who read evil and responded by working to end it, faster, smarter, and in total secrecy. The legacy of Bletchley Park is both technological and profoundly human. It is the story of minds at war with machines, but also the story of ordinary people who became extraordinary. They read the enemy's most secret thoughts and carried the consequences silently. They measured success not in medals or fame, but in lives saved, battles won, and the unbroken continuation of the mission. History remembers the victories, the inventions, and the strategy. Bletchley remembers the people, their courage, and the weight of knowledge they carried alone. And through it all, the machines hummed, the bombs clicked, and the young cryptanalysts moved through the huts with quiet purpose. Each day brought the same impossible task: transform chaos into understanding, turn gibberish into intelligence, and do it faster than the enemy could react. The war may have ended, but the echoes of that work reverberate still through computing, intelligence, and the enduring human story of courage, ingenuity, and silent sacrifice. When Bletchley's machines fell silent on May 7, 1945, the war was over, but the story of those who made it possible had barely begun. The young men and women who read Hitler's orders, who decrypted every secret, who carried the weight of unimaginable knowledge, they returned to ordinary lives. They walked away from brilliance and danger, from codes that could have ended wars in hours, into classrooms, offices, and homes, unseen and unsung. They never sought praise. They never demanded recognition. They only knew their work mattered, that each message they decoded, each rotor they turned, had saved countless lives, shortened battles, and shifted the course of history. That is the lesson Bletchley Park leaves us. True courage is quiet. Heroism does not always roar in parades or headlines. Sometimes, it is in the patient mind, the careful hand, the relentless dedication that no one ever witnesses. Those Codebreakers did not fight on battlefields, yet they were as crucial to victory as the soldiers, sailors, and airmen they helped protect. So, honor the unseen heroes who shaped history from the shadows. Remember the sacrifices, the intelligence, and the human spirit behind every decoded message. If this story moved you, subscribe now to uncover more hidden chapters of history, and join a community that celebrates those whose brilliance and bravery changed the world even when no one was watching.